All right, all you positive heads. On this week's Soul Share episode, I'm very excited to have Sa Simone here with me on the show. Sa is a fellow podcaster, author, filmmaker who is dedicated to being a way shower for people all around the world. Super excited to have you here, Sa. Welcome to the show, my friend.
Oh, thank you, Brandon. I am so grateful to be here. Hello, Positive Heads community.
I got to be on your show many months back, and that was such a pleasure. And here we are, finally. You're making it on, and it's funny because we live like literally blocks from each other too. We realized so. Um, yeah, it's nice considering most of the time guests are somewhere else in the world, and we're
That's
walking
true.
distance almost. Um,
Really,
yeah, darn close. So all right, I'm going to kick it off with my cliche opening question, which is
please.
this. You're in an elevator. The woman next to you looks over, says, "What's your passion?" You have 10 floors to answer. What do you say?
Ooh, what a good question. Oh my goodness. My passion is what sets me free, what's been helping me through these years to get out of addictive tendencies and suicidal ideation and the low lows of depression, what helps me with my OCD, what balances my derealization and depersonalization is service, is truly helping other
Mm,
people. And it shows up in a variety of different ways, with the podcast, through the somatic dance, through my work in a hospital with patients who are sick and dying, or through the work in orphan centers, or to caring for the homeless youth here in Venice.
yeah,
So
wow.
it's this is what's been setting me free, and my passion also happens to be the thing that helps other people. So I feel like I'm living a meaningful life, or at least I'm trying to, so I can
Mm-hmm.
actually die. When we try to doing good is a happy death.
Mm. Yeah, I love that answer. That's what I call the Willy Wonka answer, where the original Willy Wonka. I don't remember on the newer ones, but the elevator goes through the roof and keeps going, like, which is good. That was a worthy Willy Wonka answer. You had a lot of good things to like share in there, and you know, kudos to you for really walking the talk, like, all those acts of service. Came to mind when you were saying that was the Gandhi quote. He said, "If you want to find yourself, lose yourself in the service of others." And the reason I believe that holds true is because there are no others, right? And that's you know such an incredible, that is the path, right? So what I would love if you would share whatever feels relevant to share about your backstory. Give us some context for
Okay.
who you are and how you got here.
So yeah, it's about 12 years ago. I was working in fashion in New York City, was a co-founder and creative director of a fashion magazine. And the magazine had taken off. We were kind of all over the place, featuring all kinds of like celebrities and from A to Z, people in the music industry, people in the film industry and TV, artists. I mean, we have had like the whole gamut of people. And my
Mm,
job was to help create these stories, surreal stories to help tell their story.
mm,
And in the fall of 2012, it was November, two of my, what I thought were best friends at that point, decided that it was time for me to leave the magazine, that it wasn't congruent anymore. Our partnership wasn't mutually beneficial, or I mean, the truth is, I don't really even know what was behind their choice. I just feel like it was, they felt like I was replaceable,
mm. Wow.
and it was a deep betrayal, very heartbreaking. And I left New York, and then I went to Florida. But actually, before leaving to Florida, I looked around, tried to get another job in the industry, tried to see if I could get another fashion gig to be a creative director of
Mhm.
another magazine, or try to do fashion styling, something within the industry. I was like disciplined, determined that the fashion industry was my dream. And
Mhm.
when I realized that people were not calling me back, they weren't emailing me back, they weren't letting me in, I was like, shit, did I even have friends through all these years in the industry,
Wow.
And this is also something that I write in this new book, Spiritually Weave, because I really thought I had friends in that time, but who I really had as a friend was capitalism. You know, I was really
Mm,
transactional, very much about accumulation, very much of, and what can you do for me? And
mhm.
everyone was a stepping stone to my ladder to where I wanted to get to. Um, so I left left New York, went to Florida, and in Florida I started researching what is peace, what is well-being, what is happiness, things that
Mm,
I had never truly considered, because up until this is, I'm 28 now, at that point. And up until that point, I had never stopped to consider, like, what's the gig here? What's this human gig all about? You know, I just
right.
thought that we had to like make a ton of money, become super famous, and accumulate a
Mm.
ton of shit, and go on these drunk vacations and look fabulous. I had lost the plot. I thought that that was the gig. So I was really disciplined to arrive at that point, and to a certain degree I did at a very young age, which that created a lot of harmful tendencies. And then in Florida, researching, and one thing led to another. All the answers were leading me to the east, to India, to Nepal. And I was about to go to the south of India to study with South Indian gurus and do a South Indian pilgrimage all the way down to Kerala. And my dad comes into the house. He's like, you should actually go up to the north of India. You should go to the Himalayas and you should study with the Dalai Lama. I was like, Dalai what? Little did I like, you know, at that point that this man would
What'd you
change the
call
course of
me?
my life. Yeah, exactly. Like it would change the course of my life completely. And I looked him up online, and I remember looking at his photo on Google and being like, whoa, I know you.
Mm,
We've met before.
mm.
This is this is not the first time. It was that moment of
Soul
deja
contract.
vu, of synchronicity. Yeah. So then I soul contract, exactly. And then I booked a one-way ticket to India 10 years ago to the day, literally March 11th, 2024. It was
No
10 years
way. This is
ago.
the 10-year anniversary today.
10-year anniversary. Yeah.
It's
It
funny
might have
because
been a couple days
311 is a
before. Huh?
311 is a very significant. The first, I have to just interject there because it's a
Please.
synchronicity about a synchronicity. Like, um, I have a lot of like really wild spiritual breadcrumb synchronicity stories that I've shared over the years on this show, and we're recording on 3/11/2024 right now. Is yeah, this will come out weeks from now, but
Yeah.
it's funny because that is my first synchronicity ever sign. Was my I had a band called Kundalini 311. The band was our biggest influence, and so that became my first sign synchronicity ever. And here we are on that day years
Oh my
later.
God.
I see your book behind you, which we're going to
Yeah.
talk about. I released my book on 311. It happened to hit on 3/11/2021, you know, at a line. So it's really cool that that's like a 10-year anniversary. That's a big day for you.
Seriously. And then that 10-day silent retreat in India really changed the course of my life. The last 3 days of the retreat, we were meditating on death and our own mortality. So for like 2 hour, the 2 hour evening meditation, the first day was like, now tell your friends and family that you're dying. And then
Wow.
having these conversations, you know, in your mind, and the psychosomatic response that I had in my body. I mean, everyone, there was about 80 people at this retreat. It was literally waves of people getting sick through those 3 days
Wow.
because of
Wow.
the intensity of
Yeah.
visualizing and really
Yeah.
experiencing with the power of your mind your own death. And then the second day, you are, um, you know, making your amends, repairing, restoring whatever way you can. And then the third day, it's when just the closest people to you are by your bedside, and then you watch yourself die. And through that period, through that experience, I was like, oh my God, I have been fed a lie. I lost the plot, you know? And I also had realized how much I have like hurt myself through the ways I've been living, and how
Mm.
much I have hurt other people, and how much other people had hurt me, and how I had ignored this trail of hurts that I had created and participated in. So it was like a heavy, heavy awakening to
Wow.
have. It was like, oh my God, like, whoa, I have a lot of forgiveness work to do. And then
Wow.
fast forward to the fall of 2012, I did a 30-day silent retreat. And that's when everything just kind of like broke open. This is when I decided to take refuge and become officially a Buddhist. And at that point, I took some of the vows. I didn't take the vow of sobriety. It would be another 3 years before I became fully sober. Because at that point, I was like, I don't know if I can hang in the
Mhm.
discomfort of being human without anything to help me, to help
Right,
soothe me, you know?
right, right.
And yeah, so this is kind of how it all started. And in that retreat in Nepal is where I learned about self-compassion, self-forgiveness. It's when I learned more about karma. I learned more about the nature of reality, and through that process, I was like, oh my God, this is all I want to do. I just want to research this material. I just want to live it. I just want to be in it. And then I just kept, going to Dharma Center, to monastery, to ashram, and I just kept hopping around and developing my mind, opening my heart, healing my body. But the truth is, I never went into it thinking, okay, I'm gonna feel better so I can help other people feel better. It was purely selfish at that point. It was utterly selfish. I was like, I want to feel better for me, for my life, for my needs, for my dreams. It's all about me. I still had that twisted view. And then
Mhm.
obviously we know that the more we transform, the more relaxed we feel. It's just a natural extension to care for the others.
Wow, amazing. And it sounds like ultimately sobriety became a part of that journey years into it.
Yeah, yeah. 2017, yeah.
Wow. Wow, that's a long time sober. And is it
Hmm.
did you have an issue with substances, if I may ask? Like, or was it
Of course
just
you can ask, honey. Naturally, I was addicted to pot, so I was smoking it like morning, afternoon, and evening,
got it?
and I couldn't really like function if I wasn't high, or like be in
Yeah.
social settings if I wasn't high. And then obviously, I love my cocaine and I love my
Hmm.
tequila, So it was in the weekends. During the week, I would have like a couple glasses of wine every night, and it was so normalized smoking pot all day, having a couple of glasses of wine at night. It was like super normalized. And then on the weekends, on like Friday, you would go and get shit faced and do an 8 ball of cocaine and sleep all day Saturday and feel like shit Sunday. And then Monday,
Yeah.
back to work.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was it. The truth is, I was highly functional, so it wasn't
Hmm.
like the things were getting on the way. But what they were doing is soothing and distracting me from getting to know my needs, from getting to know my heart, from getting to know, myself, my inner sanctuary. Every time I had a little outburst of this of discomfort, which being human is uncomfortable. So anytime I felt a little discomfort, I would immediately seek out a cigarette, some pot, food, you name it.
Hmm. Right.
Yeah.
Right. Wow. Yeah, that keeps a lot of people trapped in this addiction, and there's such varying degrees of it, right? I mean, there's
Yeah.
such subtle addictions that are not even necessarily crippling, and so you, in a sense, they can almost be more insidious sometimes because you don't realize how, um, oh, this is fine. I'm a functioning whatever I'm doing,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and
Plug in
so
social media to that. Plug
yeah,
in our
right.
addiction to our phones. You know what I mean?
Oh
There's research that
gosh,
shows that people pick up their phones an average of 10 times per hour. I'm
yeah,
like, this research is either done by a big tech company or it's just so conservative because it's not the truth. 10 minutes, 10 times per hour. It's more like 10 times every 5 minutes.
yeah,
Literally,
yeah,
it's like
yeah,
it's an insane amount of time that we are seeking to run away from our bodies, to distract ourselves from being uncomfortable. And the phone
hmm,
creates this auto regulation, and that we never learn how to self-regulate. We never learn how to like be with
hmm,
discomfort. And I speak about this in the book too, because I think when people ask me, what's the biggest problem that people face when it comes to connection? Why people don't have good friends? Why they can't keep friends? And why do they feel like their relationships are not meaningful? I think a huge culprit of the problem, Brandon, is the phone. I think
yeah,
the phone is literally, I mean, it's incredible, right? We're using technology to connect with people all over the world. That's wonderful. And people are probably listening to the podcast on their phone. Wonderful. However, there has to be that point of saturation. There has to
yeah,
be that point where you reach your boundary, your edge, and you're like, okay, enough. Put the phone down. Let me
yeah,
go connect. let me go connect with another person. And something that I speak about in the book too, which is fascinating. I didn't know this as I started to talk to different scientists and different experts, addiction experts, Buddhist monastics. I mean, you name it. I went around to get a full picture to create a really firm plea that we must connect with each other. The friendship is the path, right? If we look
Yeah.
at social neuroscience, it says that that loneliness strikes in the body as a cue, like hunger. And we're not trained to feel when we feel lonely to reach out, to connect, to engage, to say, hey, I like your shoes, or you want to grab a cup of tea, or that was a really beautiful practice, to the person next to you in yoga. We are not trained to feel that loneliness and act upon it. Now, when we're hungry, we go to the fridge or we go on the apps and we order food. When we're tired, we
Yeah.
may take a nap, or when we're tired, we may drink a cup of coffee, right? We do this opposite approach as a protective mechanism to ourselves. It's really twisted how we've been socialized with our needs. Instead of
Yeah.
taking care of our needs, we're socialized to almost to go against them, and
Yeah.
to unconsciously perpetuate a cycle of misery in our lives.
Yeah.
So when we look at simply knowing, oh, I feel lonely, stop, be with that feeling, and don't
Mm.
pathologize that feeling. Don't overthink that feeling. Don't narrate the stories around that feeling. Oh, I'm a bad person. I suck. I don't have any friends. I'm so lonely. No
Right.
one likes me. Blah 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 blah. It's like pause, breathe, take a moment, be with that
Hmm.
feeling in the body. Where in the body do you feel that feeling? And then
Yeah.
give grace, give patience to that feeling, and then notice that it will start to move up and out of your body. And then
Mm.
the next step from that point is reach out to a friend and use the word need. I need
Mm.
connection. Address your
Mm.
needs with, be honorable about them, be graceful about them, be powerful about them. Like, I need friends. And I write about in the book, the word need has been demonized, has been
Hmm.
weaponized, has been we have discussed around that word, to say, I
Hmm.
need you, I need a friend. And then with the psycho spiritual babble of languaging like codependency, everyone thinks that the word need will lead to a codependent relationship, which that isn't
Mm.
what I'm addressing. I speak
Hmm.
about that being problematic in the book, but we don't even know how to engage with other people. I think the phone and social media has atrophied, has removed the limb of connection.
Yeah.
People don't know how to say, I like your shoes to a person next to them. They don't know how to compliment another person. They don't know how to ask someone out. The technology in the phone, the social media specifically, is robbing us of our capacity to engage with other people,
Yeah.
and creating a really lonely society. And there's also research that shows that if you experience chronic loneliness, or the way loneliness or isolation is interpreted by the brain is the same as physical pain. So if you experience social pain like abandonment, rejection, loneliness, isolation, it is interpreted by the brain as physical pain. And that's insane. That's like a thing that we're not trained in school. Like, hey, loneliness is a connection, is a biological need, like food, water, sunshine. It's where I feel like we've missed the plot. And when the capitalistic God took over altars, we've literally are just like, okay, do what you say, produce, 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 never rest, production over connection,
Right.
showing showing our worth based on what we have in our bank account. And
Right.
there's so much in the space that people are saying, oh, your bank account is directly related to this or that. It's like, this is very hurtful to people
Yeah.
who are experiencing financial difficulties.
Right.
And there's
Right.
one more piece that I want to bring into the mix too, which I find fascinating, is the people who have um, chronic loneliness. And this isn't people who are isolated only, okay? These are people who have friends, but their relationships are not meaningful. It shows that their brains are more susceptible to addictive tendencies because
Mm.
their reward network in their brain is heightened. So think about, and I'm not a scientist, I'm quoting all the scientists that I spoke about in the book, that I spoke with in the book, and they speak so eloquently about it. I'm just interpreting, metabolizing through my own filter.
Hmm.
And the way that we can understand this is like, if loneliness is processed in the brain as physical pain, when we are in pain, what do? We take medicine to soothe the pain. We go see a doctor, whatever it may be, and we get prescription, or we treat it holistically, right? Acupuncture, chiropractor, whatever it may be. And
Yep.
when it comes to the piece about loneliness and connection, we are so afraid of experiencing rejection that we rather stay rigid and stay contracted,
Right.
and then that perpetuates a cycle of addiction, because I rather stay home because nobody likes me, and then you feel pain, and then what do? We have to numb. So then we binge watch TV, we overeat, we drink, we smoke, we masturbate too much, we just do plug in the poison.
Right. Right. Yeah. It's it's an interesting state of the world, and I think you can see it, especially with the younger generation coming up now. They're having more trouble connecting, physically than others before them, and it's understandable. It's sort of like this. When I was a kid, there was no social media. There was no option. Like, you had to put yourself out there. And I think it's that there is no replacement for real interaction and real connection.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I love the name of the book, Spiritually We. Um, and I'd like to just, yeah, maybe if you would just tell us why you chose that name.
It was kind of a next step from my second book, Spiritually Sassy. And the
Mm-hmm.
second book was like, first book was develop a meditation practice, right? The second
Mm-hmm.
book is, feel good about being yourself, become authentic. And now this book is about bridging that authenticity into your connections, like bringing um, your heart to every interaction you have.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of but you don't need to read Spiritually Sassy in order for you to read this book. I think
Yeah.
this book encompasses all of my teachings, the last decade of personal development, of spiritual liberatory practices. I've put it all into this book to help people really do the thing that it's so vital for our well-being. And, there's a story from the Buddha that I love, that really no, that entirely encapsulates the reason why this book is so needed, and the reason why I felt so called to write it.
Mm-hmm.
It's Buddha had a disciple who asked him a question saying, hey, how important is the spiritual community on the spiritual path? How important is community? How important is friends on the spiritual path? And the Buddha answered, friends on the spiritual path, friendship and community are the path. And
Mm.
that's so incredible to like have that resounding yes, the
Yeah.
of community, because I think Western Buddhism, and that's become what we know in America, they've really removed the third jewel from the space, the Buddha Dharma Sangha. We've put a lot of effort and a lot of emphasis on self-liberation, on personal liberation, and I can get free without anybody else's help. I can do this
Yeah.
all on my own. And the third jewel is the emphasis on community, the Sangha, right? The supreme assembly, people who are walking the path with you, who can show you your shadow, who can show you your mind, or who can lift you up when you're down. And I really have been able to get through the last year and a half, where my mom died a year and 2 months
Wow.
to date. And then 3 months later, my root guru died, the one that I took refuge with in Nepal. And then 3 months later, my boyfriend broke up with me. And then a month later, I moved out of the house, and he moved out of the country. So it was just like a year
Mm.
of like a shitstorm of things. And the
Whew.
only way that I've been able to get through has been community,
Yeah.
friends who flew across the world to be with me in Brazil at my mother's funeral, friends who
Yeah.
flew across the country to be with me after I got back from Brazil. And and it was like lost. I think the death of a mother, death of a parent, death in general, is it really wakes you up to like what is important in life.
Yeah.
And I had a really special mom, and I have to name that because I know a lot of people have had difficulty with their parents. But my mama was wild. She was a lover. She knew how to care. She knew how to love us.
Hmm.
So it's been really hard. And in the book, I speak about the Dunbar research, which is these concentric circles, like these Saturn rings. Let's look at it in that way too. The outer ring is the amount of people that we cognitively can know, meaning our brain capacity could know about 150 people,
Hmm.
and give and take face, personality, name. And then within that 150, you have 50. And then within that 50, you have 15. And within that 15, you have the 5. And and the 150 are the people that will show up for that once in a lifetime event, right? A big wedding or a funeral.
Yeah.
Your funeral, sorry. All of our funerals, right? And within that 150, then you go to the 50. The 50 is the big birthday bash, your 40th, your 60th, whatever, big birthday party that you're having. And you ask your friend that has a beautiful house, can I host my party at your house?
Yep.
And which I'm sure people ask you all the time. And yeah. And so that is the 50. Now, the 15 and the 5, this is where the real work lies.
Hmm.
The 15 are the people who actually drop their plans for the night to come babysit for you so you can have a date night with your partner that you haven't had in a month or 2 months or maybe 6 months. These are the people who will fly across the world when your mother dies. These are the people who will show up and clean your house when you're depressed. These are the people who will drive you to your chemotherapy or to your CT scan or MRI. The inevitability that we're all will be sick at some point in our lives. It's just part of the human experience, and people going through their medical journeys alone is really traumatizing.
Yeah.
So the 15 are these people who got your back, who know you really well, who are there to support you. And then the 5, this is the core, which often includes people's family members as well. And within the 5, there is what I call the plane of secrets, which is where people can they know your story, they know your darkness, and they will never use it to manipulate you. They will never use it to and turn it against you in any way. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
Right.
And so this is overview of how we have to be approaching our friendships, and there's a really clear exercise in the book about how to refine who are the 5, and why aren't you spending more time with them. Why aren't you prioritizing these people in your life?
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Well, the main reason is I have thousands of friends online. No.
I mean, hello, look at the size of our communities, like a
Yeah.
million followers across social media.
So
It
true.
doesn't make any sense,
Yeah,
you
it's
know?
it's it's wild. I've never, for better or for worse, I just haven't ever felt inspired to play the game, and it's like it's funny because that's when I sort of made the decision, years back, like I'm not going to do the social media thing to the extent that you're supposed
Mm-hmm.
to if you want to be
Mm-hmm.
the most
Mm-hmm.
successful as a podcaster or whatever, as an
Mm-hmm.
example. And it's funny how it's become like the standard. Like, oh, how many followers do you have? That's how I determine your worth now, or something. And so it's really an interesting.
Exactly.
It's such a wild, weird thing, and it's so on one hand, it makes me really glad that I've sort of opted out playing the game the way I should to optimize my own,
Mm-hmm.
success or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And then you also have the moments of shit. Well, I
Mm-hmm.
didn't realize when I made that kind of decision years ago that
Yeah.
it would be the end all judge all of everything. And it determines whether or not someone books you on their show. It determines whether or not, whatever it is,
Mm-hmm.
like so much is judged around it. So I'm hoping, and I'm curious what you think, that wears off or shifts to some degree, where it's like it maybe is you can have social credit for not having a million followers. Like, what about that concept, you know? So yeah,
Mhm,
I
mhm.
guess, where do you see it going from here?
Oh, I wish I had a less
Crystal
dystopian.
ball?
I wish I had a less dystopian answer for you.
Oh man. Uh-oh, hit me.
Yeah. I don't think I think it's just starting.
Yeah.
I think it's just we're just at the beginning of completely of being utterly disconnected. I think the
Mhm.
more we put technology on our faces and we
Yeah.
wear more of it, it's going to just continue to bring us out of human connection. And it's like eating Wonder Bread, as Dr. Rachel Wuzerman writes in my book, speaks my conversation with her. She says, Wonder Bread, it feels really good for a moment, it tastes really good, and then there's a crash. And
Yeah.
not only after the crash, there's all these consequences that happen later.
Yeah.
I have to urge people to disconnect and prioritize time away from their phones, away from technology, away from screens, away from all technological devices. I think prioritizing nature, prioritizing connection. And when you are with a friend, try to be there and be uncomfortable. I think people are afraid of boredom, they're afraid of discomfort,
Mm-hmm.
and they're afraid of unpleasantness. We've created a life that is completely built on how quickly can I run away from discomfort. It's like everyone's lives are so booked and busy. This is the mantra of the capitalistic God, and it's perpetuated our psyches, and it's become our go-to and how we operate. People
Right.
have their days booked back to back. There's no time to sit on the couch and just stare at the window.
Yeah.
There's no time to sit at the park and watch the leaves dance in the wind while the sun kisses them. We don't have that. We don't have these points of contact with rest, with nothing, just
Yeah.
being, just existing. And
Yeah.
I think that the if we analyze how how lonely we are and we look at how disconnected we are from our lives and how quickly we are seeking to run away from discomfort.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are like, oh, I don't feel uncomfortable, I feel great. But it's like, okay, and you're deeply lonely, like look under the hood, my dear, go a
Yeah.
little bit deeper. Have you noticed that you when you open your phone, you go from Instagram to TikTok to your email to your text message to WhatsApp to your Spotify, and then you check your photos and you do it all over again. I
Yeah.
watch people in line in a coffee shop, and
Yeah.
I watch that thing take place, and then
Yeah.
they put their phone away and they're waiting in line, and then like literally 45 seconds later,
Back
they pull
out.
out their phone again, and it's like TikTok, Instagram, email, text message, WhatsApp, da, 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 put it back on, and then they drink their coffee, and then take a couple sips of the coffee, and they're like,
Well,
"Oh wow, the coffee is really good. Oh, I love this coffee." And they're looking around for a sec, and then pull out the phone again,
yeah,
and
I
then
know.
back to the circuit. All of these habits are here as a protective mechanism. The truth is that they're protecting you from feeling uncomfortable, but what they're doing is numbing you and atrophying you and removing your capacity to know your needs. You don't know what you need anymore. You don't know when you need rest. You don't know when you need to eat. You don't know that you need connection because you're so disconnected from your needs, because you're
Yeah.
constantly running away from feeling. And
Yeah.
I speak about this in detail in the book. I think the subheading of the chapter is integrating your darkness. It's
Mm,
really important that we pause and feel uncomfortable and feel awkward and feel
mhm,
bored. These are sacred states. These are pivotal
mhm,
states if you're truly looking to become liberated. If you're
mm,
because the difference is it's the work that I'm doing, it's I really quickly realized through the Buddhist path that this is not personal development, that this is very much spirituality, which is different because personal development makes it all about you, my life, my
mm,
dreams, my needs, me, I, which is a very egocentric, very self-serving, which is myopic and leaves you feeling unsatisfied at the end of the day, right? And then in the book, it's very much urging people into the spiritual path, which will require you to feel deeply uncomfortable, which
mm,
will require you to act and engage and reach out.
mm.
Yeah,
Yeah, I like that. I like that distinction. And it really, it's back to the quote at the beginning, right? If you can find a way to serve, if I help enough others get what they want, then I get what I want as a byproduct.
that's right.
And I think it's Yeah, it's something that a lot of people aren't realizing, and it's like, how do I, get as successful as possible so that I can show the world that I'm worthy. And I
Yeah,
think what you're
yeah.
saying is so crucial, like avoiding the feelings, like it's literally confronting and facing the discomfort is the path to leveling up and being more. And
And they
when
pass. They
and they pass.
pass. They
Yeah.
pass.
Yeah.
Everything is transient. Everything is
Yep.
impermanent. They pass. The problem is we don't allow feelings to run their natural cycle. We want to
Yeah.
stay in the daylight all the time, but we're forgetting that like nighttime holds so many blessings. The winter
Mm,
holds so many blessings. We are robbing ourselves from experiencing our full humanity. Our full humanity. We don't want the
yeah.
grief. We don't want the discomfort. We don't want the sadness. We don't want the confusion. We don't want the abandonment. We don't want anything that doesn't feel pleasant.
Yeah.
So we're robbing ourselves and each other of our full humanity, which does
Mm,
encompass unpleasantness, which does come with discomfort, which does come with pain, you
yeah.
know, and
Right.
perpetuating a cycle of love and light, perpetuating a cycle of daytime only. And these are metaphors to what I'm speaking here, obviously. Um, it's we were running away from experiencing the fullness of being human, which is
Yeah.
grief is there,
Yeah.
sorrow is there, longing is there. These are beautiful states,
Yeah. Right. Well, when you realize the sweet is never quite as sweet without the sour, and you need that contrast in order for it's a necessary ingredient. The brighter the light, the bigger the shadow it casts, right? And so realizing that this is a natural order of things, not nothing but pleasure, nothing but think about the kid who's super spoiled from the super wealthy family and all he got was everything he wanted all the time. It's not a recipe for a good person, typically, you know? And so, where I've landed with this concept is I'm not here to be happy all the time. I'm here to find peace with what
Mm,
is. You can be
mm.
at peace. You don't want happiness all the time because it's so funny how often this comes up. I've told this story so many times on the podcast, but it's just so relevant to this topic. My brother years ago was arrested for not paying a ticket. He had an open container. Speaking of alcohol on the beach, like a young kid, he's like 23 or 2 or something, and then never paid for it. And then years later, he got pulled over and forgot about it. And they're like, "Oh, we have a warrant for your arrest," and they throw him in jail. And he's the most sensitive person I know. And so him in jail and, super dark, gangbangers, the whole vibe. And it freaked him out. It was an awful experience in one regard. And in another, it was, well, he got out after 3-4 days and they let him out at 12:01 a.m. so that they could charge for another day. I pick him up, take him home. I cooked him a Hot Pocket, I remember. And to this day, if you ask him, what's the best meal you ever had? And he's
Oh,
had a lot of like wonderful meals. Guess what it was? That
oh
Hot
my God.
Pocket. So that is really says it all, right? I mean, there's way better tasting meals, but because of the contrast he was experiencing and the gratitude for the freedom that he had it back after this sort of traumatizing affair,
Hmm.
it gave him, an incredible experience. And so
Hmm.
I think that's just really an important thing to understand about, hey, am I feeling uncomfortable? Is this a tick to avoid my feelings? Am I reaching for my phone or something to numb myself? What if I go into it instead? And on the other side of that is richer experiences.
Exactly. And I love that you say the goal is not about happiness. I speak about this in the book too. It's like the goal isn't to be happy, the goal is to be free. And freedom is
Mm,
peaceful, is a
great.
sense of
There you go.
contentment. And it's so beautiful that you're naming that because I think a lot of people, especially in the psycho spiritual space, who are kind of entering the space, who've been in it for a while, it can become very much pleasure seeking, like very much
Hmm.
hedonistic. Like, what can I do to sustain the pleasure, the happiness all the time? So we're doing everything we can to extend the happiness by eating the entire bag of cookies, by
Yeah.
watching another episode, by watching another episode, by scrolling and seeing another post and another post, and we're neglecting our lives. And when as we're talking, as I'm sharing about this, one thing that comes up to me that I want to share too is there's all these statistics, right, that I cover in the book, and I'm going to go over some of them, but the point that I'm going to make is about the going through hard times in our lives and not having people there.
Mm-hmm.
And as you were able to pick up your brother during this really hard time and making him that hot
Right.
pocket, how meaningful was that? Even though it was a simple thing, you probably microwaved it or put it in your toaster. Who cares?
Yeah.
But it was like the
Yeah.
gesture of actually making it and having that ready. You know, it's like people who pick up another person at the airport without a bottle of water, you know, or without a chocolate croissant or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
maybe, or a piece of gum, you know, like it's just, I'm like, what? You're picking me up out of an international flight of 12 hours and there's no, like, you know,
Uh-huh.
common sense, people. Anyway, so let me share some statistics with you. So, and you shared about the younger generation, who how much they're struggling to connect, and the research has shown that 60% of young adults in America are struggling with chronic loneliness, that they're so lonely.
Wow.
And then we go into another statistic which shows that 2 out of every 5 people in America report that their connections are not meaningful. So when you are in a room with 5 people, you can look around and say, "Oh my God, 2 out of these people don't feel like their connections are meaningful." You know, and then there's a couple other statistics that I find so fascinating and heartbreaking is that in the last few years, suicide rates have gone up by 30%.
Wow.
Crazy, you know? And then the latest piece of the last piece of these statistics is that research from last year, from 2023, shows that the elderly population reports that they have no social group, meaning they are not in contact with their friends, they're not in contact with their family. 40%.
Wow.
Now, with my work in a hospital serving the sick and dying and serving the elderly population as part of my training as a chaplain, I'm like that statistic is very conservative too. We're looking more like 60 to 70% of the elderly population are in a hospital bed by themselves, you
Yeah.
know,
Wow.
where people are calling them, but they're not there. Or guess what? A lot of you that I've seen, they have kids they haven't talked to in 20, 30 years. They have siblings that they have, but they haven't talked to in God knows how many years. It's we've lost the plot. That
Yeah.
connection is vital for our well-being. You know, think about the moment when you receive really good news and you are by yourself in your couch. It's like, oh my God, Brandon wants to have me on his podcast.
Hmm.
Yay, wonderful. And you are by yourself on your couch. It's one thing. Now, if you call someone or you run outside and you get a coffee with a friend and you tell them, oh, excuse me, and you tell them, hey, I got these really good news. I'm going to be on this great podcast. And they, that person is happy for you, like sympathetic joy, sympathetic
Mm-hmm.
happiness. The happiness is doubled, you know? It
Yeah.
nourishes you
Right.
in deeper and deeper ways. And then when it comes to sadness, same. If you receive really sad news and you are by yourself, you are experiencing the burden all by yourself. Now, if you are able to be with someone or share with someone that you've experienced that you're receiving these sad news, the burden is halved. You know,
Mm.
like there is research that shows that when we share a burden with somebody else, it
Mm.
doesn't feel so heavy. When we share our happiness with somebody else, it feels doubled. You know,
Mm.
this is
Interesting. Wow.
beautiful
That's
to,
incredible.
yeah,
Wow. I never heard that statistic. Um, Very, very fascinating. So, I'm curious. I'm looking at some of the things that you like to touch on. That I sort of asked before we kicked this off earlier,
yeah.
and one you mentioned the plane of secrets,
Hmm.
and I'm just curious what is that?
Hmm.
What does that mean?
I touched upon briefly when I was talking about the core five, right? That those
Okay.
people are the ones who can hang out with you
Mm-hmm.
in the plane of secrets where they don't manipulate your story.
Ah.
The plane of secrets is based on this Sufi poet Rumi. Obviously, we all know his quote, and I'm paraphrasing now. He says something to the degree of like, we are able to meet each other on that field where right or wrongdoing don't
Mm,
exist. You know,
yeah.
where
Right. That's a nice
bad,
quote. It's a good quote.
happy or sad or good or bad, you know, like it all fades away. We can hang out in that space.
Yeah.
Um, free of these preconceived biases about what's right and what's wrong. And in order for you to have friends that can hang out with you in that space, they have to have done the psycho, spiritual, somatic work themselves as well. Because otherwise, when you're sharing something that you've done that you're not proud of, we're so habituated to judge each other that they will shut down or act out, and that will indicate to you that you did something bad, that therefore you're a bad person. You feel isolation on a subtle level taking place when someone shares with you. When you're sharing with someone something that you did that you're not proud of, most people only share these things with their therapist. They don't share with their partners or best friends. But I make a point to share difficult things that I've done that I'm not proud of with my friends, with the people that I want to call in, not call out, that are people that I want to deepen, because it is a really it's a foundational piece, and it's not trauma dumping or trauma bonding. It's a way to test each other's material. Can I unload a burden, and can you receive it with a non-dual perspective, nor this or that? It's something else. It holds this spiritual meaning. And it really requires the people that you are in connection with to be so deeply present in their body, and to have done a lot of self-editing to be able to arrive at a point where they're no longer approaching life only through a dualistic perspective. They can hold paradox. They can hold third truth. They can open themselves up to see transgression through a transfigured perspective. You know what I mean? And that takes a lot of work. And you may notice, like, the friends that you have now, you may be talking to them and they're really distracted because they have all these tabs open in their minds. We all do. I've been with a serious meditation practice for a decade now, and it's still, my mind is really distracted, but it's the choice I make to keep coming back and listening to the words. And if you are really easily distracted in connection, in friendship, say, hey, let me see if I'm hearing this correctly, and then say back to them what you heard. That's an easy way of engaging and remembering and letting your friend know, who's sharing something with you that's meaningful, that you hear them, and that you're with them. And a big thing is that when someone starts to unburden their sorrows or their mistakes to you, we immediately jump to fixer syndrome, which is something I speak about in detail in the book too, because I was a fixer. I wanted to resolve everyone's problems because I thought I knew better. I thought I knew how to help everybody, and all they needed to do was this exact thing. The way I resolved my chaos was the way people could resolve their chaos. I literally lost the plot, until I was like, oh, a rude awakening took place. And I was like, oh shit, look at me thinking I know better because it helped me. It isn't how it works. I think the greatest gift to healing trauma, the greatest gift to healing, period, is a loving awareness. Can you be with someone in a non-judgmental way, in a non-dual way? Can you be so present that your presence is emanating warmth? And we know, in the face of warmth, everything changes. Everything becomes composted. So people can process their feelings and their stories and their pain by you just witnessing them. It's a miracle that takes place, and
it's like really holding space,
But what does that mean exactly? I think a lot of people give you the holding space, or they're like nodding.
Right.
Yeah. That's right. Oh my God. Oh my God. But inside, they are engaged with 100 different tabs in their mind. If you can know that these tabs are open in your mind, but still check yourself. Okay, I've lost the plot. I've gone engaged with this tab. Now let me come back here. And if you lose the plot, instead of just saying, okay, and you like literally don't know what your friend said for the last 5 minutes because you disassociated, you've left your body, pause and say, remind me, refresh my memory a little bit. What did you say? Or whatever. There's simple cues for you to say, let me see if I'm hearing this correctly, And then notice how this like inferiority and superiority complex plays out in our minds constantly. If someone is saying something really awful that happened to them, you want to say something even more awful happened to
Right.
me, or someone says, oh my god, I got these great news, I'm going to be on this, I'm going to do this amazing thing. Oh, guess what, I'm doing this more amazing thing. It's this
Right.
inferiority superiority complex is so steeped into our how our minds are socialized,
Right.
and they're hurting us, they're keeping us lonely, they're keeping us stuck and isolated, and connection is a cure.
I think what you're touching on is really powerful in, learning, being comfortable saying the thing that isn't real comfortable is it's so beneficial to everyone involved. Like, hey, let's just cut through here. Hey, I disassociated completely there. My bad. Can you, just how do we bring it to the most authentic truth possible in any given moment? And things can always be said with some level of grace and ease. And if we're willing to do that, we give people the permission to others to do the permission, and it helps to unwind us from this dance that we do of
Mhm.
BS,
Mhm.
and it's super important what you just
Yeah.
touched on, I think.
And I speak about, thanks for that recognition. And I speak about this perpetual like society of pretending, where look around how much people go around saying, hello, how are you? Good, good. It's like literally, it's like the
Mm-hmm.
go-to. Everyone everywhere says, how are you? Good, good. And we say we respond good
Mm-hmm.
before the other person has even asked us, so we don't even have to engage in any
Yeah.
deep,
Yeah.
meaningful connection at all. And I actually say very boldly in the book that we have to remove how are you from our vocabularies. We just have to
Mm.
say nice to see you, or good morning,
Mm.
good afternoon, hello, because it really, we don't have the time, and oftentimes we don't have the depth of presence to engage with anyone's full humanity. And because you don't have the time and the presence to engage with someone's full humanity, you are creating a culture of pretending, and you are announcing to the world unconsciously, unintentionally, that it's not safe to unload how you truly feel.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
it's perpetuating a culture where people are so desperate to feel good that they go as far as saying good when they are crumbling inside.
Right. Right. Yeah, absolutely. Bring some authentic realness to the moment as much as you possibly can, because the world needs it.
Yeah. And it's not that you're gonna bring this to every single person. You're not gonna
Sure.
say, oh, this happened, I got these
Well,
needs.
there's a
Like,
time and a place, right? Yeah. It's
yeah,
like following
yeah,
your inner guidance and intuition. Is this appropriate? Is this even relevant? Would this be helpful? Would
yeah.
this be helpful if I say this thing? I think that's, before anything passes through your lips, is it helpful? Is it kind?
Hmm.
What is it? The gates.
The three gates.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Is it
Is it
necessary?
true? Is it
Yeah,
necessary? Is it true?
yeah,
Is it kind?
yeah,
Is
yeah,
that it? Yeah,
yeah.
I love that. I love
Me
that.
too. And if we only had that, oh my goodness, it would change the game, because we feel that we need to tell someone and how they need to be living their life, or how they did something wrong. And it's like, is it true? Yes. But is it kind? No. And is it
Yeah.
necessary? Like.
Yeah, maybe it's necessary for them to do that, to fall on their face or whatever it is you're judging around.
Yeah.
This idea, I always share the story. I had a guest on the podcast years back who claimed he would see people's higher self as he came into contact with them oftentimes.
Hmm.
So here's Saw's higher self, like visible to me,
Hmm.
it was pretty interesting. And he said he'd walk down the street in San Francisco, and he'd always send love to the homeless,
Hmm.
that he'd see as a regular thing, people experiencing homelessness. And he said one day he's doing it to this, his higher self appears and says, "Do I look like I need that from you?" And it was a really like interesting, powerful moment for him, because he's like, oh my gosh, like I'm judging this soul in a certain that this is what he's seeking in this moment. And it's like, whose karma are you trying to get in the way of? Like, this is an eternal being that has its own agenda, and it doesn't necessarily need your pandering to it. I always thought that was a really powerful. It was a very powerful story that has stuck with me that I've shared many times. And then I had sort of a exclamation point put on it a few years ago during COVID, where you live nearby. I'm over on Rose, just past Lincoln, where all the restaurants and things are. And it was where we still had to sit out on the sidewalk if we're going to have, you couldn't be inside during COVID. And so me and my girlfriend are riding to have some lunch or something down on Rose. And I see, as you know, there's a lot of homelessness in the area. And there's this one particular man walking, and his gait is like extreme. It's like zombie, and I'm like, whoa, I fall into it in that moment. Look at this guy, poor soul. Like, what an intense energy, like, oh, sad, whatever, fall into that story around it. And then we keep going a few blocks. We sit out on the sidewalk, we're to order our food. All of a sudden, this man that we passed catches up to where we're at. Now, all of a sudden, I look over to my right. He's 5 feet away on the sidewalk. Eyes clear, face clear, looks at me and goes, "Hey, how you doing?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm doing good. How about you?" And he's like, "Oh, I'm doing just fine." And then winked at me and kept going. And he had on the same jacket as me, basically. It's like this, it was such a powerful experience. Like, this soul knows what it's doing. I don't know if it was an angel. I don't know, what was going on there, but it was a real exclamation point to that story. It's like, we don't need to fix anyone. We can show up as an example of what peace looks like and point the way, perhaps, if it feels appropriate, and share when it feels appropriate. But, like Ram Dass said, and all I can do for you is work on myself. All you can do for me is work on yourself. I really, really believe that.
And I think there is like a one layer. I introducing a paradox here. I think what you're saying is 100% the high truth. And I think a lot of people are so they have so much disgust and so much anger towards homelessness. They pathologize and criminalize poverty, and pathologize and criminalize homelessness. And I think jumping into this place where, if I live as my best self, I'm already helping the person that's on the street. I think this is to a degree, and I write about this in a book too. I think it's like a really blunt spiritual bypassing of part of the path, because I believe spirituality leads you to become a humanitarian. I believe spirituality leads you to become a social justice activist, to dismantle punitive approach, to dismantle the approach to pathologize and criminalize poverty that we see so bluntly here in our neighborhood.
Really is what the root of most of it is, a big percentage. So it's like, oh, hold on, I'm mad at you because you're criminalizing you because you're short, or because your hair is too dark. Or
exactly.
Mental health is like, what these people have been through. And I think you're right. It's a dance, what we're talking about there, between like now spiritual bypassing versus how can I create the space and allow the invitation, and what can I do? Because certainly I would love to contribute positively, and I don't need to enforce my will on someone who's in their process either. And so I think that's really where the two kind of can come together, and finding that, like so many things, balance, finding that sweet spot.
And find see where you're at. If you still have judgment towards Black, brown, queer, poor people, homeless people, fat people, disabled people, if you look at your biases. It's so amazing to just look at your own mind. And I say amazing as like, please go do it, but it's truly awful how our biases are so messed up, and how it's really hurtful. But I think, observe your mind, get to know your shadow. And you don't need to say, oh, I feel this way about this population because of this thing and that thing. Like in Buddhism, we don't really focus on the why. Because why perpetuates the story of a villain and a victim? Why perpetuates a story that doesn't anchor you in the present moment, that leads you to the past? And all centers around you, which the path is about entering a state of selflessness, of dissolving personal identity, which is, we need a whole other hour to kind of enter into that. But I think in short is to just wrap this point up, it's observe your mind around people that you deem as bad, unloving, undeserving, and just observe how your mind speaks about them and how your body feels, and then
Mm-hmm.
drop the story and just be with the feeling in the body. You know, you're gonna feel, oh, that feeling of disgust in the body, that feeling of anger in the body, that feeling of terror or fear in the body,
Mm-hmm.
and you have all these stories associated with it. Just be with the fear in the body. The
Yeah.
more you're able to be with the fear in the body as a passing sensation, the more it will start to move up and out of your system. The more these stories that you have around homelessness, around a certain population that you don't like, the more these stories will have no power, because what gives power to the stories are the feelings hardwired to them. So if you
Yeah.
are integrating your darkness by learning to sit and be with your feelings, and sit and be with your feelings, and I can never stress it enough, being with your feelings is the gateway to deep presence, which is, you know, the gateway to liberation here and freedom. It
Right.
will change your game if you're able to observe what comes up in my mind, you know, as
Yeah.
I'm engaging with these kinds of people, and not talk back to the story, go to the body. Where is the feeling?
Yeah. Yeah. It makes me think of my girlfriend talks about this when she is encountered by someone that maybe she instantly is falling into some level of judgment around, or distaste or dislike. It's not, it's a vibe. I'm not like,
Mm-hmm.
or maybe they seem dumb or whatever it
Mm-hmm.
is, then
Yeah.
instantly she's like, oh, I observed that in myself. Now I'm going to be extra tuned in to see what it is they have to contribute that's good and positive, and why is this coming into my field, and what can I learn from them, and bringing that awareness to your
Mm-hmm.
reaction, and
Mm-hmm.
then saying, this is actually, I'm going to use this as a cue to be extra tuned in to see what
Beautiful.
is here. And and then of course what what the experience ends up being, seeing some piece of them they never would have seen, or getting some insight or reflection that's
Yeah.
super helpful and meaningful. And I think it's such a powerful way to
Mm-hmm.
um yeah to deal with that thing, that experience we all go through, right?
Mm-hmm.
We all
I
have.
love this, and applaud to your girlfriend. That's really wise and beautiful.
Yeah, yeah. Wow. Looking at the time, we're already just at an hour. That went fast. I
I
would like
know.
to, as we wind down, shift gears a little bit. I
Mm-hmm.
love to ask stories of synchronicity or serendipity or a positive paranormal story, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
just wondering if you have any. And normally I warn people up front, hey, think about this during the show, and I forgot to
Mm-hmm.
do that with you.
It's okay.
So
Mm.
curious if something comes to mind for story time that you'd like to share.
Yeah.
And we did have a little synchronicity with the 311 thing
We did.
earlier. That's cool.
We naming that as one, but I have one, the latest one, which is which this was kind of mind blowing. So 2 weeks ago, I was getting ready to go meet my puppy. I was going to
Mm-hmm.
drive out to Riverside, which is an hour and a half outside of LA.
Mm-hmm.
And the night before I go to meet Bodhi,
Mm-hmm.
I get a text message, a DM from Krishna Das' daughter,
Mm-hmm.
saying, "Hey, Sa, can I connect you with a friend? She wants to have you on her podcast. And thank you so much for sharing about grief. It's really helping me, and I know it's helping so many people." She said something really beautiful. I said, "Oh my God, so good to hear from you. I miss our times of being in the church in New York with Krishna Das, with her father, and upstate New York at the Garrison Institute." And she's like, "Oh my God, I missed that time too." And you're not going to believe, Bodhi is a full-blown teenager. And I had forgotten that her son's name is
Oh wow.
Bodhi. And
Oh
I
wow.
message her back. I say, "Oh my God, I can't believe that. I can't believe the synchronicity. My daughter, my puppy, his name is Bodhi."
Wow.
And okay, so that was a big one. In the morning, I wake up. I have in the notifications priority, in the priority, of someone's like verified or has like a big follower account, and
Uh-huh.
it's a guy who's Portuguese, and he's a veterinarian,
Mm-hmm.
Portuguese veterinarian, started following me, and he found me through my series on Gaia. And he says, "I did your somatic series on Gaia, really loved it. Thank you so much for your work." So he's a vet.
Mm-hmm.
right?
Right.
I'm
Right.
getting a puppy. So that,
Right.
and
Wow.
then here's the craziest of all. I
Uh-huh.
arrived
Oh,
to pick
wait,
up
there's
Bodhi.
more.
There's one more layer. There's 3 layers to this. The deepest of them all, the craziest of them all. My mother had green gray eyes,
Mm,
and guess what? Bodhi has green gray
wow.
eyes.
Oh, that's
So the
beautiful.
moment that I picked her up and I FaceTime my dad, and he saw her eyes, he started crying.
Wow.
Yeah. So I think this qualifies as a good story.
Well, that's a great story. Yeah. I think of a guest years back who their thing was connecting with animal spirits. And I remember her talking about on the show, she's like, yeah, anytime you have uh, an animal that comes into your life, that's like super soul family. Like you are very connected to the soul of that animal. They're part of your soul pod that you've come from. And I think that's a really interesting to think about. It's this little family member that's coming in that you're deeply connected with. And I had my grandmother had a dog growing up. I've been having a lot of interesting dreams. Like I had some spirit communication with my grandmother and grandfather recently that led to something very tangible in life. It's a
That's
whole story.
beautiful.
Yeah, and so my grandmother and grandfather, when I was a kid, and they're both gone now, had a dog, and I had a dream the other night where I'm literally at their house and I'm talking to the dog telepathically. Like I haven't thought of this dog in so long, and he's like, "Hey, so good to see you." And he's like super happy and jolly, and we're talking telepathically in the dream. And he's like, "Yeah, being human, not for me. That's way too complex. This is much simpler." Like, it was like, wow, what an interesting communication. It was them a few months ago, and him like literally a few weeks ago. So
Oh
it's
my God.
yeah, yeah.
That's
It's like one of
wonderful.
those things I would never. It had the same feeling too
Yeah.
of like the grandparents. When my grandparents were there, it was like, oh my gosh, they're on the line. I've broke through the veil. Like, what's the message?
Mm-hmm.
It
Mm-hmm.
had that same energy. Like I'm literally talking to this animal, but it's a spirit. And it was cool.
And I guess there's one more layer to this that I forgot to bring it in now, tie into this too. I spoke to a medium maybe a month ago
Uh-huh.
to get in touch with my mom, and as soon as we open the call, the medium is like, "Oh, your mom's here.
Mm-hmm.
She's saying something about do you have a dog?
Oh wow.
Is your dog okay?" She's talking about a dog. And I was just like, like
Wow.
keeping a face straight to like
Right.
not signal to the medium that she was on the money, that she was
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
on the plot. And
Yeah.
she's like, she's like, oh, she's saying that, oh, okay, she's saying that you're gonna get a puppy.
Wow.
I was like, okay, now I can like break down and say yes.
You
Okay,
are
yeah.
money. Oh, that's a
Yeah,
good medium.
exactly. Yeah. So I was like, okay, great. Yes, I am. I am getting a puppy. She says
Wow.
that's a great idea because the puppy has been with you for a long time. This is not the first time you guys are doing this.
There it is,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's such a fascinating thing to ponder and consider. And yeah, this has been a fascinating podcast, my friend. I so worth the wait to get you on finally. And I know we rescheduled a couple times. And what is the best way for people to connect with you, to follow your work, etc.?
On my website, sahdsimone.com, SAHDSIMONE.com,
We'll put
or
a link in the
social
notes.
media. Yeah. And I think the biggest gift I have for people right now is my book. It's my new
Mm,
book. No, I did write it during a really hard time in my life. So the wisdom in it is it's coming from a really deep place. And I read it. I'm even, it's kind of a cliche to say this or kind of corny, but even myself reading my own words, I'm like, damn,
yeah,
that's some
right.
fire shit. So go get the book and leave me a review on Amazon or wherever you buy your books. And I really
Beautiful.
appreciate that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, those hardships, it's not, it's kind of makes sense that you would be writing. That's like fertilizer, right? I mean, it's like, look, all the great art comes, it seems, from some level of pain. And there it is, the blessing in disguise, right?
Yeah, true.
Well, this has been a pleasure, my friend. And I do have one final question for you, my cliche closer.
Okay.
And it is this: in 60 seconds or less, what is the meaning of life according to Saad de Simone?
Oh no, I don't do good with the rapid fire questions. The meaning of life. Shit, I
It
don't
can be
know. I
longer than
think
60 seconds then.
okay, I think the meaning of life, I mean, what I have subscribed to is to become a bodhisattva, right? I took this vow in 2018, which is to
Mm,
create a life of service to others. And
mm,
there in this intersection of helping the other, um, you are able to realize, that like how you opened earlier, that there is no other, that we're all deeply
mm,
interdependent, that we're all deeply interconnected. The Bodhisattva vow gave me life when I was really in
mm.
a really dark place. So I think the meaning of
Mm.
life is to be of service,
Yeah.
is to leave a legacy of compassion and kindness. I think that's the meaning of life. At least for now, this is where this is with what I'm working with, and it's helping me to get out of bed. It's helping me to engage, because the trauma of that I went through in this last year, it kind of really shakes up your world,
Yeah.
in a massive way, where I'm like, what's the point of this gig again?
Yeah.
My
Right.
mom is dead. What the, like
Yeah.
what?
Right. Right.
Like,
Right. Right.
what do you say? So service has been what's been lifting me, um, and kindness, I'm just going to say one more thing too. I remember my mother's funeral. There's, close to 200 people there. My mom wasn't a famous person, wasn't a popular person by the social media standard of the word. She was just
Yeah.
a really sweet, loving human being. So all
Yeah.
these people wanted to come be there with her
Yeah.
family. She died,
Mm, beautiful.
and that is what I want. I want to be able to leave a legacy of like sweetness and love and
Mm,
kindness, where people are like, um, they celebrate the life I've lived when I die.
yeah. You are doing it. And I applaud your example and offering to the world. It's been incredible to connect here. And I look forward to, yeah, doing that in 3D sometime sooner than later. And
Please.
yeah, let's do it.
Okay.
Well, all of you out there as well, I so grateful for you taking the time to listen to this offering and tune in your beautiful brainwaves and incredible hearts. Until next time, journey well.